I remember when I was planning for my 2020 trip across the country. It was a trip I had conceived of during the pandemic winter and had come to plan on those evenings or late nights when I was feeling a little overwhelmed by the stresses of that time, which were considerable, all the worries, all the sadness, and the isolation of going through the pandemic in a one-person household. So during that time, I came up with this idea of me and the dogs going across country in a van, which I'm not sure exactly how I started that idea, but there were so many people that I had missed seeing, and I thought I could go and see all of those people. All of this planning, all of this anticipation was great. It was a good distraction. However, the thing that I worried the most about was crossing the desert. I was terrified about crossing the desert in my 2008 van, which was in good mechanical shape and which I still worried could develop overheating problems in the extreme heat of the desert. I did a lot of research. I talked to people who had made that trip many times and decided that the sensible strategy was to get up early and to cross before it got really hot, which is what I did both times, and it worked just fine.
All this planning did not mean that the trip went flawlessly. A couple very disturbing encounters unsettled me. For example, I wasn't prepared to encounter racism and some actual hatred in the first campground that I went to on my way back, where they refused to let me stay in the main area, me and the van, and instead put me, the van, and the dogs in a swampy area next to a resident who had a Confederate flag-draped rig. Now, the preparation, though, that I had done for these other pieces meant that I was able to have a little more awareness, a little more curiosity, perspective, and agility when it came to this particular night. And it allowed the journey to be a quest and not just a series of calamities. Because believe me, despite months of planning, almost nothing went as I planned. In her new book, Michelle Obama writes about our need to accept the world that we're living in, and that in this world we must prepare for what we can know and develop those resources that we can have to be prepared, and also to allow this sense of preparation and intention to aid us in those times that we can't plan for or expect. She writes, "These times have left us feeling wobbly and unsettled. They have caused more of us to feel cautious, watchful, less connected. Many people are, for the first time, feeling something that millions upon millions of others have had to feel every day of their lives, which is what it's like to feel out of balance, out of control, and deeply anxious about the future." She says that this is an important principle, and in this brief conversation and dialogue with you this morning, I would like to unpack some of what she says we need as provisions for the journey. And we have the actual backpack for that. So as you heard in our chalice lighting, Michelle Obama doesn't have a magical formula for overcoming all that we face at the beginning of 2023. And yet she was willing, in her new book, The Light We Carry, to talk a little bit about the tools she uses, what she takes on her travels with her. She wanted people to know that everyone is going to struggle in a world which lacks an easy equilibrium and in which we all face challenges to our resources. She says people write her all the time because she was the first Black First Lady of the United States, and they think that she will have the answers. To one teenager who wrote her, she said, "Here's what I want to say to anyone young or otherwise who is trying to find their sense of purpose inside all that is big and fierce and urgent in the world. That's exactly right. You want to make a difference, you want to change the world, and sometimes your own constraints, your own mental health will get in the way. And so," she says, "we need to have tools." Those of you that know me know I'm also not a very good neat packer, so it may take me a while to find each of the things that I want to share with you. Here's the first one. Small delights. We should have an image for everybody to see in a minute, but one of the things that Michelle Obama found herself compelled to do right as the pandemic started was she found herself ordering knitting needles, and she couldn't figure out why, because she had never knit before. She just found that it was a small thing she could do that made her feel comfortable. For me, it was making sourdough muffins, chocolate buns, and spelt waffles, and making the muffins and mailing them to my mother, who is sometimes unable to get out for meals each week, is a simple grounding that I continue to this day. Just as filling my grandbaby's waffle container, which is a gray plastic one with a lid and a picture of owls on it, with spelt waffles every week, is also another small thing I do that just gives order to my weeks. When the rains were coming last week, I could hardly get upset because there was such a bigger catastrophe in my home, and that was that my waffle iron died. And I couldn't understand how I was supposed to get through, but then I thought about it and I realized that my daughter's family actually has their own waffle iron, and I put the batter in the car, and then there we are. What small delights enliven your spirit? The other thing that Michelle Obama talks about is the need to know who is in our Rolodex, our phone, our contacts, who can help us. And this is actually a church picture directory from a couple years ago. Wouldn't it be great if we did a new one in 2023? But this is what she says. Our hurts become our fears, and our fears become our limits. For many of us, this can be a heavy inheritance caused by generations. It's a lot to try to push back against, to try to unlearn. And one source of fear is the concerns that we sometimes feel very isolated and alone in these concerns because we keep them to ourselves. We wonder, do I belong? What do others think of me? How am I seen? These are the questions that Michelle Obama says we ask, and she knows them well, as her role as the only Black First Lady our nation has ever seen, and also as a very tall girl growing up in Chicago's South Side, where her race was not nearly as much as an isolator as was her height at that time. She also says that someone that she's had conversations with is Stacey Abrams, the voting rights activist, who for her it was about being poor and being a valedictorian, invited to the governor's mansion, and when she and her family arrived and got off the public bus in front of the governor's mansion, being denied access by the security guards in front of the mansion because in their minds, someone who didn't have a car couldn't possibly be invited inside. For me, it was being born multiracial when it was still illegal in our country, being raised by a single mother, and being someone with religious inclinations in a staunchly atheistic home. We all have our own sources of isolation, the things that make us wonder if we belong. You probably know yours. But the thing that is certainly an antidote to this is community. So friends and people we know who will travel with us, even if it's a phone call in the middle of a stressful time, makes a difference. A bonding moment for me in my mosquito redneck swamp experience was calling a new friend and having her really listen to me. We laughed and we cussed and we got me through that very hard night and the week afterward of 100+ mosquito bites. What is it that you need to face? What is it that makes you question whether you belong? And who is it that you have in mind to help you face it? If you don't know the answer to that last question, it might be a really good year to invest in getting to know people better, maybe right here. We will continue to unpack. This is a bowl. And it's a bowl that was painted because my poor children and their cousin grew up in the paint-your-own pottery era. It's here in the sample of the bag of tools because it represents what Michelle Obama calls the kitchen table. And here's what she says about that. Your kitchen table is your safe haven. It's a place to rest in the storm. It's where you can pause the endless and exhausting pursuit of overcoming everyday challenges and safely dissect the barrage of indignities that come your way. It's where you can scream and yell and cuss and cry. It's a place to lick your wounds and replenish your strength. Your kitchen table is where you go so that you can breathe again. And she shares 2 family maxims from her kitchen table. One that she taught her children when they were gathered around recounting their days, which was, don't do life alone. And then the other, which is the one that her mother always welcomed her back to the table with, which was, come home. We will always like you here. Now, we know that that isn't true for everyone in their family of origin. So Obama says, home can be a complicated, less comfortable idea. It may represent a place or a set of people or a type of emotional response that you're trying to move past. But that's okay. There's power in knowing where you want to head next, where you want to find a table that you can sit at and laugh and cry and cuss. Chosen family, or even your congregational family, may be that place. What is your safe haven? Are you still searching? How could you create it with chosen family, or through participating in other ways that lead you to deeper connections? The whole of you. This is actually the reason why this is so heavy. Give you guesses as to what it is. It's a boot. I know some of you have these fashionable accessories in your closet too. We'll get back to this. You can just sit right there for a minute. Michelle Obama tells the story of China, her White House assistant who followed her into her busy post-First Lady life as well. And one day, China asks for a one-on-one meeting, which Michelle Obama thought was odd, as they were always together and often one-on-one. But she asked for a meeting where they could sit down and talk about something particular. And Michelle Obama was quite terrified because she was sure that China was resigning, and she didn't know what she was going to do without her. But instead, China told her that she had been keeping secret for years, that she had worked with the Obama administration and then later with Michelle, that her father had been in federal penitentiary for most of her childhood. The weight of this, which she had been toting alone for years, needed to be unburdened. And Michelle Obama writes, she explained to me that her entire life she had been ashamed to tell people that her father was incarcerated. She hid it from her teachers and friends when she was young, not wanting to be judged or stereotyped for how her family was built or what they were going through. And as she went on to college and then started working among a bunch of seemingly fancy people at the White House, she felt the stakes get only higher. That day in my office, I couldn't possibly reassure China enough that that story, her whole story, was completely okay with me. If anything, it only deepened my respect for her. These days, China describes that conversation between us unlocked something in her. And Michelle Obama goes on, I also recognize that in many workplaces, or for someone newer to her position, or if China had been more alone as a woman or a person of color on our team, this sort of risk might not have been worth taking. There's no single rule of thumb that will ever apply. Well, this is this boot, because I had to wear it after I fell in a hole walking my dogs one dark night when I was struggling with something. It represents both how intrepid I can be and also how foolish I can be sometimes in how I respond to the challenges in my life. And that's the whole of it. Obama goes on to say, when someone chooses to lift the curtain on a perceived imperfection in their story or on a circumstance or condition that might be considered to be a weakness, what they're often revealing is the source code for their steadiness and strength. What are the imperfections that you need to stop wasting energy trying to mask? What do you need to claim out loud to at least one person to be able to fully inhabit your life. Let's see if I can find, here it is. This last thing is a candle holder. It was given to me by a friend, and a candle. Because the biggest resource that we have is our own light. And that's important. It's the title of Obama's book, and what she says is, I've learned it's okay to recognize that self-worth comes wrapped in vulnerability, and that what we share as humans on this earth is the impulse to strive for better, always, and no matter what. We become bolder in brightness. If you know your light, you know yourself, you know your story in an honest way. In my experience, she writes, this type of self-knowledge builds confidence, which in turn builds calmness and self-knowledge, and also an ability to maintain perspective, which leads finally to be able to connect meaningfully with others. And this, to me, is the rock of all things. One light feeds another. One strong family leads strength to more. One engaged community can ignite those around it. This is the power of the light we carry. What is the source of your light? And how can you let it shine more brightly? Let us shine our light boldly as we step into this 2023. Let it be our guiding light. Let it be the map for our aspirations, for ourselves and for our world, even though we don't always know where we're going or where we've come from. Let us know that we can be as prepared as we want to be. We can pack everything into our backpack and be as ready as we can be for this journey. But when it comes right down to it, there are going to be some things that go bump in the night, some things that strike fear in our hearts. Let us go into this year with intention, purpose, and knowledge of our own belovedness. Let us acknowledge that we are not alone, and let us recommit and make it a deep commitment to know that we can continue this journey to create the beloved community, this blessed journey, this one life, this 1 year in this one life that is ours to embrace. May we make it so.